That's right. Okay, good morning, everybody. Sorry for the slightly late arrival. And the first thing I think I've got to do on everyone's behalf is thank you, Susan, for welcoming us to Bradford. It looks fantastic, the City of Culture today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And my first responsibility is to vacate the chair, I think, which is to hand over item 1 to be handled by Joanne. I think he's going to do that for us today.
Thank you, Mayor Burnham. Please, can I have a nomination for the chair of the Rail North Committee, please? All in favour? Sorry. A seconder, please.
From Mayor Braven.
All in favour? Okay, thank you. Motion passed. Please, can I have a nomination for the vice chair?
Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Councillor Hinchcliffe. Seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Many thanks. Motion passed. Congratulations to Mayor Burnham and Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you. Well, the double act is back together again. Thanks, everybody. And we've got a really good agenda today, full agenda. We have an operational update later from Northern. So welcome Tricia and Matt, and also from TransPennine Express. Welcome, Chris. Good to see you all. I think we have some new members of the committee at their first meeting. I don't know if colleagues want to introduce themselves. We are welcoming the Mayor of Lincolnshire, Greater Lincolnshire. I've got that right, haven't I? Greater Lincolnshire for the first time, Dame Andrea Jenkins. So, Andrea, very welcome.
No, it's great to be here. I've been on some Zooms with yourself and Mayor. It's an important committee. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, good to see you. And any other new members, just to, so if colleagues want to introduce themselves, that would be great.
John Murray, I'm a ward member for Kirkby, Stephen and T-Bay in Westmoreland and Furness, and I'm transport portfolio holder. Soon to be superseded perhaps by a mayor.
Now we know where you're from. We might arrange a Rail North Committee at T-Bay Services at some point, if that can be, if we're allowed to do that on a road, on the road system.
Do it at a railway station, it's a bit more awkward because the most of the railway stations are out of town. But Appleby's actually in Appleby. Right. Be a great place to come to.
Good to see you, John. Jean, have you been before? Sorry.
No, I'm Jean Flaherty, Deputy Leader, Warrington Borough Council.
Good to see you. And I think everyone else is familiar to us all. So thanks, everyone. So should we get on with the rest of the meeting? So agenda item 2, welcome and apologies. Are there any apologies first? Do we need to record those? Or
we've got a list, Chair. We can record people who apologise. Cheshire East, Cumberland, East Midlands, Holland, East Yorkshire, North East and South Yorkshire.
Thanks very much, David. Obviously, in terms of just scene setting, we're all, I'm sure, looking out for the conclusions of the spending review tomorrow and implications for transport across the north of England. Last week, we were certainly the mayoral combined authorities were pleased to receive confirmation of our city region sustainable transport settlement, which does provide a platform for investment in transport infrastructure over the period. Obviously, whether we'll find out everything tomorrow, I don't know. At the kind of western end of the north, myself and Mayor Rotherham have been making the argument for a new line to connect to TransPennine route upgrade, so that we can begin to have a modern, reliable service right across the north. But there are still further arguments to be made, aren't there, around Sheffield, Manchester, over to Hull, up to the northeast as well. So I think what we've managed to do in the aftermath of the HS2 decisions, both on the west of Pennines with Liverpool, Manchester, part of what we would call the Northern Arc, but also the excellent work that Lord Blunkett has done for colleagues across Yorkshire in the White Rose partnership. West, South and North Yorkshire. We're beginning to see the re-emergence of a plan in more of a phased way, but one nevertheless that delivers pan-northern modern rail infrastructure, which I think this committee has long called for, and we've made that argument again. I don't know whether we would hear tomorrow about the conclusion of those proposals, but I do believe the infrastructure strategy will be coming next week, I believe. So maybe at that point we will see. But obviously the spending review is something of the backdrop for our conversations today, and obviously is relevant to when we hear from our operator colleagues later in the meeting. I think that's it by way of scene setting. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on this item.
May I, Chair?
Of course, Tracy.
Just to say, just for the committee's knowledge, that when HS2 was cancelled from the Midlands to Leeds, that chunk of money was then not woven in to Network North. So we've lost out substantially this side of the Pennines. So I'm really hoping, as you say, Chair, that excellent piece of work on the White Rose rail plan, that we do get that acknowledgement that we've lost out on a number of fronts. But to be pragmatic and a phased approach seems to be what government are looking for. But we stand ready to do that with our ideas and our innovations and our ability to collaborate cross borders and work together. And I was also pleased to see that the new mayor of Holland East Riding, Luke Campbell, is also very happy and wants to sign the White Rose Agreement because he understands that, we need to work together across Yorkshire. So just to put that on record, Chair, that it was so disappointing when HS2 was pulled to Leeds, but also the impact of that funding has not rolled back into Network North. So we're fighting tooth and nail to have better transport this side of the Pennines that connects us to Manchester and up to Newcastle. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tracy. I think we were all supported yesterday by a report from the IPPR North, which I think very much endorsed what we're doing. I don't know if any colleagues from TFN have any details on the IPPR report. Is that Katie?
Just the headlines really, because we were engaged with some of it. It's draw on some of the good work that this committee's done and more widely the North's done. I think the stark reality was the numbers in terms of the differential between public transport spending between the North and other parts of the UK. And that was certainly the main message. It wasn't. I think the director was quoted as saying it isn't about not giving money to London and the South East. It's about actually recognising there's a differential in how much is there, and actually when you add that up over X number of years, the difference that could have made to connectivity and for communities across and businesses across the north of England. I'm very happy to share the report and the link to the release back round to committee members afterwards, because I thought it was a really good piece for the north of England actually. Thank you, Chair.
Likewise, thank you, Katie. I think it'd be great if you could do that. So, colleagues, let's proceed into the rest of the agenda. Item 3. If any member of the committee has a relevant interest to declare, please do so. Either now or in filling in the relevant paperwork. Item 4. Minutes of the previous meeting. This was our meeting. Of the 20th of November, sounds a long time ago.
So weird. I thought that was a typo.
It is correct. As you recall, we had to cancel our February meeting. So yes, we haven't actually met formally since November. So we did check the minutes, I believe, at the time and took any comments and feedback. But please, if there are any further corrections or changes, do let us know. Thank you.
Hopefully not. Are they approved, colleagues?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 5, rail station accessibility. And it's really great that we're continuing to put this item at the top of the agenda. As I said I wanted to do when I came in as chair, I think we've followed through on that as a committee, and rightly so. So I'm going to invite you, Katie, to present the report in a second. And I think it's true to say we're beginning to make some headway on this issue. However, I think it's clear from the paper that if we were to make all stations in the north of England step free. There's a bill of something like £1.5 billion to do that. That to me is not an insurmountable amount of money to give all of our residents access to public transport. And it seems to me that we need a discussion today as to kind of how do we, we're going through a spending review where, we've not necessarily got all of our arguments together to make the case for that money to be released, but it should be released in my view. And we have a job as a committee, I think, to bring forward the date by which all stations are accessible to all citizens of the north of England. It's not acceptable in this day and age that people cannot access their local station. If I think in Greater Manchester, Levenshulme station, 45 steps to the platform. I mean, that just isn't good enough, because that takes that station out of bounds for many people. There's obviously more creative ways of doing it. We're going to talk about devolution in terms of rail soon, and does that present opportunities to regenerate the area around stations, connected to stations, releasing planning gain to improve the stations? I think all of these ideas should be in the mix. But we are more positively making headway because of the focus this committee's brought to the issue, and the report reflects that. So Katie, I'll invite you to present it to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, first of all, thank you to the committee, because it's actually been the hard work of the members around this table through the task and finish group that it established that got us to the point where we've got a much greater clarity on what it would take to get our stations to where we wanted them to be. And the culmination of that initial work was the advice that we submitted to the Secretary of State a couple of weeks ago, seeking a quick wins programme. There is actually some things that we could do quite quickly and quite cheaply that would make an awful lot of difference, not just on accessibility, but actually on safety as well. And I think, secondly, it made the point as well, I think, Chair, as you've just said, that devolving funding to northern political leaders gives the opportunity to align that funding to other work that you may be doing around land use planning, housing, regeneration, and actually could help speed up delivery too. And of course, we've got our colleagues here from the Operators and Rail North Partnership, but how actually with the work that we do already with the operators, we can make progress around accessibility too. We haven't had a response to that letter. It was sort of pitched ahead of the spending review, but I was really pleased that we got quite a lot of media pick-up and coverage about the committee's work on it. And I think what we would be after today, as the Chair has suggested, is a steer of where we go next with this work. We have now mounted a huge amount of evidence and a case for change, and worked out what we could do more quickly. But there is still a great big pound sign next to that. So your steer and input at this stage would be helpful. We will hopefully see a response from the Secretary of State, I hope, before too long, and then that allows us to determine the work forward to keep it, as you say, Chair, right at the level of everyone across the north, because this is something that does affect our entire region. And if we've got an accessible transport network, actually that's really good for sustainable economic growth too. Thank you, Chair. I'll open it up for comments and questions.
Thank you, Katie. And I think we have to recognise, I don't think we're going to necessarily get everything we want that was in the letter, as you said. So it is about where we go with the work we've done and how we move it forward. From a Greater Manchester point of view, we'll probably touch on this later. We will be starting to take rail lines into the B network as of next year. And certainly we are looking at releasing our own funds through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement to invest in stations. So we're beginning to release Greater Manchester funding into the station infrastructure. So that might provide a route to start to quicken the pace of change. But it's still a job, I think, to get this issue to the top of to top of the national agenda, because it's not there at this moment in time. But I think we've put it at the top of our agenda, and what we've now got to see is that repeated at a national level. So open to the committee for discussion, really. I mean, the sobering fact is 48.5% of our stations have step-free access. So over half of our stations are not accessible to everybody. And that's where we find ourselves still, and it isn't good enough. So, Councillor Mundry, over to you first.
Yeah, I think we've got the good work's been done, but we need to sort of put it in a priority list, or at least a list of what can be done and what the stations need improvements are. If we can have that list sent out, we can actually look at the mayoral authority saying, actually, we can afford to do this one quickly, and look at the quick wins we can do with where there's small amounts of money can make big differences in some of our communities. So if we can have that information, that list sent out there of what the stations are, what actually work needs doing on them, and then with some cost into it, we can start getting some done, not in a priority order, but maybe on a financial order, to say what can be afforded now, what can be afforded quickly, and where other funding can be levered in for developments nearby. I can say, can we lever some money into them? But I think that list will be great, so the good work's not sort of lost and waiting for something to happen nationally. What can we do locally while we're building up to that?
Does that exist, Katie? Then could each member of this committee have that list?
Absolutely, we've got that level of detail. We've discussed it with officers, so we will make sure that's available to you and your teams.
So I think the important thing is, rather than just to see this issue in a transport silo, obviously the colleagues, the leaders and deputy leaders, the mayors around this table know what regeneration ambitions there are in those places connected to those stations. You know, we are looking at, I'm sure Tracy and Susan will have similar plans here. We're looking at mayoral development corporations in Greater Manchester, at least 5 in the coming period, and some of those will be in places like Staley Bridge, Ashton, Middleton, Bolton. Pardon? Well, yeah, I'm sure Steve will have his own plans as well. But it's when you then can connect the station to the wider regeneration ambition in the area that you can potentially kind of look at some more creative ways of solving the issue. Yeah, Andrea.
Okay, right, thank you. This is welcome news. I mean, even when I was an MP, I fought for 9 years to get disabled access in Morley, and I mean, even people with a pushchair. So I think this is great. So if we can have that list, that would be brilliant for across Lincolnshire. Because as I agree with you, Mayor Andy, in this day and age, it's not acceptable, is it? No. So I just want to say I welcome what you do.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Tracy.
I mean, 72% of our stations in West Yorkshire aren't accessible. We've spoken about this on a number of occasions, and I know that the TransPennine upgrade is going to tackle a number of those. But what I would like to see when funding is constrained, and government said that they would allocate 350 million from HS2's allocation for this money, but we are also in the market for supporting interventions in our regions, ramps and so on. But does TFN have any research on innovations around the world that are maybe lift packages separate that you could buy? You know, are there other ways to do this that could be cheaper or more innovative? Is there any research out there that could help us in our thinking? Because if we are, as Andy says, developing mayoral development corporations, and certainly here in the Southern Gateway in Bradford, that's what we're looking at. How do we spend that money wisely, but also be future-proofing with the best innovations, you know, the newest ideas? Because we can't continue, as we are.
I think the short answer is yes. It certainly comes to mind a country like the Netherlands and the level boarding and the way that works in terms of some of their city regions. So let us take that away, because I can talk with our team, see what we've got already. But I know we've got a very helpful person in Gary's team who's been a real champion for safety for women in railways, and she's already looking around that aspect of safety at stations in other countries as well. So we've got a number of research strands. So let me take that one away and come back with some advice, because that's I think that's it. It's how else can we do this and do it differently? And it's a combination of perhaps looking what's happened elsewhere as well as what we can do through devolution. Thank you, Mayor Braben.
I think you've made an important point, Katie, around rolling stock as well, because we're going to discuss rolling stock, aren't we, on the agenda, and our aspiration should be level access on trains as well as step-free access to stations. I think that, you know, it's really important, I think, to set that clear ambition as much as we can. To follow on from Tracy's excellent question, I was just going to ask also whether there's any thinking that could be done about a different way of solving this problem, you know, rather than it piece by piece, you know, one council arguing for it and one, you know, whether there is a way of sort of going out as a scheme, as a kind of group of stations that then could bring down the procurement costs, and it feels like the way we're going at this maybe isn't the cleverest, and, you know, whether, you know, if we were to sort of chunk it up into sort of, you know, a mixture of stations and see if that could bring down the overall price tag. And that certainly would be, TfN could do some thinking for us on that.
Absolutely, and I'm sort of going to look at our top colleagues as well, because I think this is where the industry can come together and we can use that convening role to look at the problem. Because there is, when you think, we'll come on to TRU when we get to the TfN board later in the month, but actually the progress that's been made there has been because it's looked at as a whole scheme and a whole programme. So we'll take that away, Chair. Thank you. I was conscious, I think Councillor Murray wants to come in.
Councillor Murray.
Thanks very much indeed. First of all, just to say how much this work is appreciated and fully endorse the work, what's going on behind it, and the level of detail it goes into. But I'm from an area where I think the national assumption is if you're going to visit Cumbria, you go by car, which is because of the state of public transport in the area. We have got on the Settle Carlisle line stations where they still say, take care crossing the line, please wait till the train has gone, which isn't exactly accessibility. And even in stations where there are slopes, sometimes there are such slopey slopes that there's no way you'd get up in a wheelchair, or on the other side of the track get down the private road with potholes in it. And it, in principle, is accessible. In practice, it isn't. The other line that we have, of course, is the West Coast line, which is picturesque, which is the best way to describe it. Useless would be another way of describing it, perhaps, which is a bit unfair. But Arnside, for example, a very well-used station, and really could do with exactly this kind of facility to let people get from one main line through to Barrow, for example, which is becoming an even bigger place of employment. There's a huge amount of investment going on, and what we don't want is for Barrow just to end up being the biggest car park in the world.
Oh, very well put indeed, John. Thank you. It's clear from the conversation we've had that the committee wants, you know, to continue to focus on this issue. I think if we could have that international work that Tracy mentioned, maybe there are some less costly solutions out there that, you know, that
You can buy lifts that you can attach to your station.
and I think we need to start, you know, it's not good enough to say to people, we'll on the current allocation process, the way it works, we'll get there by 2055 or something. I mean, it's just not, you know, because that's basically saying to some of our residents, you will never be able to use that station in your lifetime, and that's just not an acceptable thing to say, is it? So I think we need to keep coming back at this and start to see what more innovative approaches in terms of different procurement approaches or different technical solutions might help us. Thank you, though. Thanks, Katie. So let's move on to devolution and rail integration across the north of England. David is going to present to us. This is, of course, a substantial item. We do need just to reflect on some of the things that we've been through as a committee over the years. I think I'm the only member of the committee, maybe Susan, I don't know, who remembers the guards on trains debate that we had a number of years ago. And I was talking about women's safety on the rail network. I personally believe strongly that is a big confidence builder, and we were right as a committee to take a firm position about that. More recently, we had the success, I would say, of preventing the widespread closure of ticket offices across the north. And obviously, following the timetable chaos of 2018, you know, the committee, I think, played quite a role in pointing out, you know, what was behind that, and it was the poor infrastructure. A number of reasons, but one being, you know, the infrastructure is simply unable to carry the ambition that was set out in that May 2018 timetable. So, you know, I think the voice of this committee has been important, and actually we have had significant wins. So it's I think it is now crucial that we come to the fore and articulate what a more devolved role, rather than us having to fight things that we've disagreed with, what is a more devolved role in the railways, in Great British Railways going forward, and looking at a more place-based approach to rail in the future, building on the role of mayoral combined authorities, but obviously devolution is beginning to spread around the table more and more. So it, in the end, will be applicable to everybody. So, David, I think I'm going to hand over to you first, but I do think we're going to hear from TransPennine and Northern on this item as well.
Yes, Chair, thank you. In fact, I'll hand over to Gary after my bit to introduce the operators, if that's okay. On the first bit, I think you've summarised it really well in terms of, you know, this committee having a voice on rail through the current arrangements that it didn't have before. Of course, the predecessors actually helped secure removal of the pacers. Obviously, the Secretary of State at the time had a role in that as well, but this was all work that the Northern leaders wanted to do collaboratively, and obviously that has set the scene for the paper we've now got on rolling stock, looking at the next generation of trains coming in. The paper also highlights that we did make a response, as you will have seen, to the government's consultation on rail reform. I think really at the heart of it was supporting the mayoral partnerships, having a really central role going forward with Great British Railways as the next sort of iteration of devolution. We also made the point that we need to see great focus on growth and accessibility and enabling flexibility around the finances as well, so that we can bring local funding and link into developments, that type of thing. I think the other thing that we reflect on here is that the industry has been very good at engaging with us. We've got operators here, we've got Network Rail here today, but often the engagement through this committee has been what you might call a bit more of a distressed engagement, where we've been sort of given difficult options to wrestle with, or you have as committee members. And I think there's an opportunity to kind of reset that balance in the next stage and really be setting out to the industry what you as individual mayoral combined authorities and collectively want to achieve, like on accessibility, but other things as well. You're going to hear later from work we've done collaboratively with Network Rail on an infrastructure and investment plan, a long-term plan for the first time. And I think that's the sort of thing where the committee could play a role in making sure it's integrated with local requirements and scrutinising the delivery of the industry under Great British Railways or other arrangements as well. So I think the plan is that we could, as officers of TFN, help you as a committee map out really what the landscape should look like, you know, starting from the mayoral combined authorities' ambitions, absolutely, in the north, and show how that could work and input to the industry in the next phase of devolution. So the suggestion is that we could develop that, working, of course, with you and your lead officers over the summer to make sure we capture entirely what your aspirations are and bring that back as an initial proposal for the committee to look at at the September meeting. So that's really, I think, all I want to say on that part, Chair. Happy to take questions. Then I say we can move to Gary and the operators.
Thanks very much indeed. David, should we head, or anybody want to pick up on anything there? Andrew?
No, just very briefly, obviously Roland
That's fine, Andrew, absolutely. Could I just elaborate slightly on something I said before, because Greater Manchester is kind of in the midst of some of this already, and I don't want anything that we do to sort of cut across what other ambitions might be elsewhere. So I do think it's important just to understand, for colleagues on the committee, to understand where we're up to, and you know, if anyone had any concerns about anything that we were doing, we would want to take those on board, because it's, you know, it's only right that everyone sees where we're up to and is able to sort of comment on it, or to diverge from it if that's, you know, if that would have presented a problem. And the plan that we have developed with colleagues in the rail industry is for 8 lines to come into the B network, 2 next year, and then 2 further groups of 3 lines in 27 and 3 more in 2028, very much on the TfL model, so TfL overground. We are planning to do the same, and it would mean integrating fares in a capped system. So that, in some ways, is the single biggest conversation that we need to have with the government. Obviously, some of the stations as well are out with our boundaries, and we need to work closely with colleagues in those areas to make sure everyone is comfortable with what we're proposing. But we're keen to move quickly because obviously starting to sort of build out the idea of an integrated system in the north is something that we can't wait forever. For the residents, it could be much better value for money. Picking up John's point before, too often rail travel isn't competitive enough with the car, and if you look at one of the lines that will be one of the first to come in, which will have Glossop services coming into Piccadilly, I think a peak return is something like 12, 13, 14 pounds. I don't know, but obviously your transport finishes at Piccadilly, and that's for some people not enough of an incentive to buy the train ticket, and consequently some of the loadings on some of those lines are, well, they're not 100%. They're significantly lower, so there's empty seats being carried. What we're trying to get to here is a model that gives the travelling public more for their money, because they'll be able to use the trams and the buses for free as part of the capped system. But then the trains are fuller as well, and there's fewer cars on the road. And in the end, the subsidy for the Northern Rail system may be able to, over time, begin to be reduced. So, I don't want anyone on the committee not to know where we're up to, because I would be keen to hear any kind of points or any concerns that anybody would have about any of it. So, Patrick.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think this is one of the important things. The industry is about to undergo major transformation. That is undoubtedly true, but it's not going to be. It's going to be more evolutionary rather than revolutionary, which I think is the right thing to do. And I think the point you've just made about trying to get passenger numbers up and get that confidence. And I think this is an area where the committee itself can actually play a major role in reassuring other parts that they're not being left behind. Because you've referenced Glossop, Derbyshire, as opposed to Manchester, therefore not technically part of us, but it is technically part of us. It's a natural feed in to Manchester. So I do believe that's one of the areas where the committee can help to reassure and also spread progress where it's with other mayors as well, because that is going to, as you rightly say, nearly the whole of the north will be mayoral next year, or the vast majority of it will be anyway. So I think that's getting that cross-boundary service and reassuring people that they're not being left behind somehow is actually one of the jobs that this committee well fits into its remit. Because if you look at other parts of the country, the West Midlands is very much almost a tied area. Wolverhampton, Coventry, Birmingham, etc. And we have not got the same geography. We've got the problems of the Pennines, wonderful as they are, but they are a bit of a problem as far as some of the transport challenges it faces. So I think the job that this committee can do with the bill, and I think David is well onto it, and the committee is well onto it, is when the bill goes through, is to make sure that we get that chance to feed in, both through advice, but also a voice as well. And I think that's one of the challenges over the next 2 years.
I think the role of this committee needs to be, I think, part of the mix here, isn't it? Because where you have rail services that are not contained within, I mean, obviously the lines that we're looking at are, we're not trying to take anyone else's lines. These are just Greater Manchester commuter lines. They're coming in and out of the city. So it makes sense for, even if people are outside our borders, it still makes sense for them to be under the B network. But then there still needs to be a mechanism whereby if there was a disagreement about something or other, there's still a way of resolving that in a formal way. Susan and then Peter and Tracy.
Yeah, I was going to refer to just that point there, Birmingham, that this surely is a kind of mechanism for us to be able to start those conversations, isn't it? I think we all want the devolution on GBR to work well. I think we're all behind it, obviously. Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, we're all looking at what can be achieved through that. So we all want integrated local transport, don't we? So it's a natural next step for us. And that's why I think the government is wanting to push devolution quite quickly as well, so everybody has got the access to those powers all at the same time. But as you say, Mayor, there has to be some mechanism by which we talk to each other and decide what happens on each side of the border and how that meets up. And I know in the statutory consultation response, we do say a recommendation is to empower local partnerships and enable integration, but obviously there needs to be some what behind that. And of course, I'm very much one for not just waiting to know what government say to us, but actually going towards it and say this is how we think it should work. So exactly. If we can do some work in that space to say, look, we're a mature partnership, we've been working together a number of years now, this is how we think cross-border GBR could work, I would be very much willing to have that conversation. I think it's about the North taking charge of its own destiny, isn't it, really? And this is one of the areas where we need to step forward, I think, and play a role.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's no criticism of anyone in this room, but we know that Northern as a construct wasn't necessarily ideal, was it, at its birth, if you like, when you had, I think I'm right saying, 3 different railways in the north of England and were kind of brigaded together, weren't they, for the purposes of privatisation back in the day. I think we've kind of wrestled with those challenges, haven't we? Or certainly as a committee, we've wrestled with those challenges. And I don't think it's a bad thing to go back to that more place-based approach, and a railway that's not as unwieldy at times, and it's very difficult to run a railway that is like that. So I think in the end, this will be a sensible way of kind of the more place-based it is, the more things will start to make more sense, perhaps, than they have. And this committee has wrestled with some of those things that were the sort of legacy of those decisions back in the 90s. Peter, then Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. Is that picking us up okay? It's just certainly for somebody that represents a city but largely rural combined authority, that simplified, integrated and crucially cross-boundary system is something that I think this committee really needs to push for. And it'll be, if we are going to get to that One North, as was outlined in the IPPR report the other day, then we do need to think about the whole of the North. And that presents its challenges in terms of integrated rail fares and cross-border fares. But I think they're challenges that we need to rise to. Just one concern, Chair, if I may, as we progress down the devolution route, we really do need to guard against any parts of the North being left behind. At the moment, there's starting to be a trend of combined authorities with city regional status seems to be attracting more of the funding than those that don't have city regional status. And there's a real danger in that those without city region status do start to be left behind. And I think as a committee, we need to guard against that if we are going to deliver One North.
Well, it's an important point, Peter, but it's why I think what you've done with the White Rose partnership is very positive. And that, to some extent, should guard against some of those differentials. But it's, with colleagues in Warrington and the Liverpool City region and Cheshire, we've done a lot of work on infrastructure, haven't we, together? And again, I think it's important to, keep those sort of sub-regional and regional partnerships on either side of the North. I do understand the point that you're making. I think what we've got to do together is challenge the figures that Katie read out before. There is still a major imbalance, isn't there, in transport investment in the country, and sometimes you feel like a stuck record when you go on about these things, as I have a habit of doing, but we can't, just because it is sounding like us again making those same points. We can't stop making those points because, you know, we do need to see a more balanced approach to transport infrastructure funding from north to south. Tracy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair, and absolutely, Councillor Kilbane, about how we can make sure that those regions that don't have a big city attached to them do see the benefit of this collaboration. And we know across the north, you will not grow the economy of the north unless you unlock capacity at Manchester and Leeds. And that's why I think the ability for mayors to work collaboratively for the good of the north, I think, is what this committee does very well. And I really welcome this paper because it's very much future focused. It's not looking in the rearview mirror. It's looking at the changing landscape. My concern, if I'm going to be candid, is how long it's going to take for GBR to be up and running and effective and efficient. We might have our own localised organisations, as we do in West Yorkshire with the Strategic Rail Partnership, where we all sit round the table and try and solve the problems that are in front of us. But how can we, to Councillor Hinchcliffe's point, offer government a solution that will help us? And you'll have seen only a few weeks ago we launched the Weaver network in West Yorkshire. It's our integrated network that is going to take in bus. We're bringing buses back into public control. Tram, we've got the money for tram and also for rail. And we have, as Andy was explaining, self-contained routes, so Ilkley to Leeds, the 5 towns, for example. There is no reason why they are not in our integrated tap-in, tap-out ticketing system with our M-card. That is multimodal already, so we're in a good position. But I think this is a really good news paper because it sets us up for looking at the solution for across the north. What is the way that we make those decisions of teaming and ladling resources, of phasing developments, and also bringing government with us, that this isn't about subsidy. This is about growing the economy and is about fairness when it comes to the north. And it was pretty galling, the IPPR report, and should make us all pretty angry. But we also want to use that anger and that energy to find great solutions to work collectively around this table to deliver those things we can deliver now in the short term and have a medium-term vision and a long-term vision as well.
What's that, Tracy? Anne, and then Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we firmly believe that it's essential that we achieve this vision, but we mustn't lose the focus on our customer service. We must make it, we shouldn't be making it more difficult for people to travel from one region to the next. We need to make it seamless. We need to make it tap on, tap off. I mean, where I live, next street along is Greater Manchester. The other end of the town, next street along, is Warrington. And we've got to work comprehensively to make sure that all of our customers can get on, get to work wherever they are, and make sure that their wants and needs are met by this vision that we have. Thank you.
I completely agree. and I think as this evolves, you know, we'll have the B network system. The Weaver network is coming into being soon. Your mayor, Mr. Rotherham, still claims he's going to introduce the A network to get at Greater Manchester with the B network. Pardon? What we then are going to have to do in the stage, maybe beyond where we are now, is then have what other reciprocal arrangements between those systems and how. Obviously, you sound like you live in Haydock or Newtonley Willows or somewhere. And Billinge. I know it well. You know, we obviously do then have to think about people who live in those areas. And actually, what you would want would just be a tap in, tap out system everywhere, and people wouldn't have to worry what bit of it they were travelling on. It was broadly similar, but we've still got differential fare structures at the moment, haven't we? And it's probably not possible just as of today, but certainly that's where we should be going in the long run. So, I mean, what you can see though here is how a different transport system takes shape in the north of England in the next decade. You know, with all the fantastic ambitions that Tracy's just outlined here. You know, you can see it and you can feel it now. This committee, I think, as David said, has been fighting rear guards against negatives, and whereas finally we kind of say, right, this is what we want, and this is, you know, a bit of a path towards it. So it is real progress. Katie, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to thank the committee for its support, really, because this is about how the North, the collective North here, works out how that cross-boundary comes together. This committee has been, yes, it's definitely been a rearguard action, but the power of this committee has been its voice, it's been its cross-party support, it's been its convening. And I think we've got a unique opportunity now. We can see the MCA ambitions taking shape, some a bit further forward than others. How do those map with what we know our industry colleagues are doing and what we know about the rail network and the way the North works, with the talent that we've already got in the North, in your teams, also in the Rail North Partnership, in our operators and in TFN. So I think as your officers, we're actually really excited to do this work because we think this is a chance for the North to say, this is what we want, but we need to do it quickly. So that's why our commitment is to get pushing on with this over the summer with your teams. Because one of the benefits, actually, Mayor Braben, your nervousness you mentioned about GBR, actually, I think now, if we can come back and say, this is where the North wants to be, we've got a real opportunity to influence that. It becomes our plan rather than us responding to a plan.
Katie or David, if you could just outline for us, what is the policy timeline from here? You know, what are the milestones with the creation of GBR that this committee needs to know about? There was a fear at the start that GBR might be a quite top-down, monolithic entity, and we've got to make sure we're working cleverly all the way through this journey to not allow that to happen.
Yeah, and I think from HR, I think the reality is there's still some way to go to understand how it is going to organise itself at a detailed level. We're talking like a 2-year timeline to get it fully up and running. So I think that's where, because we've got the committee, we've got some of the mechanisms, we can actually start now on some of those issues. So I think if we get ahead of the game September, in the autumn, we will genuinely be setting the agenda. We are talking to GBR already, I'll be speaking to someone actually next week, just to try and understand where they're up to. But I think it is about us seizing the agenda, doing that work in the autumn, and having a clear plan that works for all of you as mayoral combined authorities.
One thing I'd like to suggest, if the committee agrees, is to invite Laura Schoaf back to the committee at some point soon. So for those who don't know, Laura is the Chief Executive of the West Midlands Combined Authority.
No,
But has she left now, is it? Oh, no, it's missed me, out of date there, Tracy. But she was. But she's now the chair designate, I think, or even the full chair now of Great British Railways. So obviously somebody who knows a place-based perspective when she sees one, and I think would very much be in tune with the views of this committee. But we need to work with her quite quickly to articulate that plan. So maybe at the next Rail North Committee or the one after, whichever suits. But I think we should invite Laura back reasonably soon.
We'll take that away, Chair.
Great, thanks, Katie. Gary, I've not missed anybody, have I? No. So Gary, over to you now. Operators.
Thank you. I might just say, Chair, unprompted on behalf of the department, that they've also asked us an RMP to ensure that as early opportunities for devolution come to light, we're able to implement them. So that I think the department's in the same place of, excuse me, thinking of a rolling and early programme of steps towards devolution rather than waiting for a kind of formal large step at the launch of GBR. In respect to the update from the operators, the committee will recall that when we last met, Northern were subject to breach notice under their service agreement with us, that had been triggered by the level of cancellations at that time. They've answered that over the recent months, and they've set out now a programme that looks both at recovering the position and then modernising the business. I'm always conscious that everything that I say in the introduction, I'm just stealing some of Matt and Tricia's material, but worth a recap. One of the biggest issues had been, as the committee will know, reliability of services in the West on a Sunday. Get to hear me even more loudly now. Apologies if you couldn't before. So Sunday services in the West are an issue for Northern long-standing, largely because at the same time as the operator was looking to run a full timetable, they were entirely reliant on volunteer staff.
So late last year, just after we last met as the committee, Northern put a proposition to the conductors in the West, and that was looking for a short-term agreement that would allow for negotiation more fully with all conductors. That was rejected comprehensively. It's very disappointing and led to the activity we had to take before Christmas with respect to a short-term plan. But since then, there's been a huge amount of work between Northern and the Conductors Union, RMT, and the staff as well to, and again, I'm stealing, or in danger of stealing Tricia's material, but to understand why it is that strength of feeling was there, what else needs to be done to unlock a reset with the conductors, and then some of the long-standing disputes you were referring, Chair, to the role of the Guard. That's one of them, some 7 years later, I think. So to enter those formal negotiations, though, Northern need a mandate from government, and that's where we currently are walking through the more detailed elements of that with government in the hope that we will then get a mandate that will allow Northern to formally put a proposition to conductors in the ballot. In the meantime, we have still the restricted Sunday services in the West, of course. Northern will update us on that and plans for building back when the landscape permits, but they've also moved on, I think, a good deal in preparing wider modernisation programmes, as well as identifying other pressures that we're inevitably going to follow, that are inevitably going to follow. So, sorry, as we await the arrival of new rolling stock fleets over the next several years, and that general plan and the first of all, stabilisation, and then the improvement of performance is something that I'll invite Matt and Tricia to walk us through in a moment. I'll introduce Chris at the same time to save me coming back in. TPT, the committee will recall your close involvement when TPE came into public ownership during a time of really poor performance, and Chris as MD then came along to us with some tough recommendations and asks, and I think we're going to take the opportunity today to have Chris come along and tell us how he's got on. I think I think it's not quite a game of two halves because there's no less work going on in respect to the Northern side, but it is something about how close involvement and engagement with the committee and support is what both the operators need really to get through the issues that we've faced. So I'll hand over to Matt and Tricia for me and give you back the device.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Chair, thank you, Committee, for your continued support as we aim to not put sticking plasters on some long-standing problems, but actually achieve a sustainable improvement in performance. And we know a high-performing railway does generate customer confidence, but it also creates opportunities for our communities, underpins economic growth, and then also hopefully supports your ambitions for your areas and the North. So as Gary mentioned, we have got a plan in place. It's in the first phase, which we've called stabilising, and you can see that improved performance and that stable performance since the beginning of the year. Engagement has been really good with colleagues and with our trade unions, and the success criteria for us is about achieving a truly 7-day railway and resolving the 7-8-year-old role of the Guard dispute. And as I mentioned, that engagement is progressing well. The Sunday timetable, the reduced timetable, does continue. It does really help us and it helps customers, gives them predictability. That impacts those northwest depots and our train crew there, our conductors there. We do recognise the reduction in service. It's not what we all want, but it does give us that predictability. It still does rely on volunteers. I thought I'd just make that point. And I'll bring Matt in shortly just to give an overview of where we are with that improvement plan. But I did want to just mention a few things before that, and it might chime with some of the conversations that have already taken place here. I wanted to reiterate our priorities for the next few years. The first is to improve that performance and ensure our customers can get to where they want to get to, often cross-boundary. And we've put an ambitious plan in there, which will be to achieve 90% time to 3 reliability. for our train service and reduce cancellations to 2%. And we've done quite a large amount of engagement with colleagues so that they all know that that's a priority. They can all get behind that and ensure we can deliver our timetable consistently. But alongside that, another priority is to achieve that inclusive and accessible service and represents the people that we serve. And we have to work hard to build that trust with customers, enable them to make more journeys, and that will bring more revenue in. We also, I would say, working really, really closely with Chris, Network Rail colleagues, we're all in public ownership already. So in some respects, we are shadow GBR, and we can start to work as GBR, the philosophy around GBR, and hopefully work with you in the same vein. We've had some recent leadership conferences, so I've spoken, and Matt has, to all of our managers right across the north, and we invited our Northern Accessibility User Group to come along to that, and our chair, with a real focus on accessibility and improving passenger assistance. It is at the heart of what we do, and I just wanted to give you some examples. It's not just about physical accessibility, although that is really, really important for us. That we've just launched a passenger assistance app for all our station colleagues. We have trialled Turn Up and Go in Lancashire now. We've put new priority seat covering in Yorkshire as part of a trial. We continue Try the Train to try and reach those hard to reach communities, and people may not see rail as something for them, building confidence in those who face barriers to accessing rail. And we've also, I'm really, really pleased to say this, we've launched a full team in Sheffield in our Customer Experience Centre who are there at the end of the phone, as well as on the end of a digital app, to help those people who have booked assistance with us. That's a recent announcement. And what we're seeing with the better performance is that is building customer trust. It is encouraging demand. So actually, our revenue is reflecting that, our passenger journeys are reflecting that, and we're seeing a 9% year-on-year increase in revenue and growth. And we're seeing that in commuters as well. So it's not just leisure, we are seeing really strong commuter growth, and this is aligning with a national picture, and there's maybe more intent to work in the office, but leisure does remain strong, and we're seeing some of the favourable weather we've had, but some strong commercial drivers as well. So the outlook, we remain positive. That improved operational stability is providing that platform to build customer trust. One of the things that the team has been doing with you, with officers, and this is open to anybody who hasn't seen this yet, is we are sharing an ambition to increase passenger journeys by 30 million by 2030. We are keen to work with you on that and support you with your local growth plans, and that should be for the benefit of the whole region. On top of that, Northumberland Line went live in December, and I'm really, really pleased to say that as of last week, we have now seen 350,000 journeys just on that line. So this is a line that hasn't been used since the 1960s, so multi-generations haven't seen a good passenger railway in their area, and we are seeing the demand for that, which is a great example really of the positive impact rail can do for a community and for customers. I heard you mention digital pay-as-you-go. We are pleased to be involved in 3 of the 4 digital pay-as-you-go trials that were announced last week. We'll start later this year. They're going to use GPS technology, and the routes will be Harrogate to Leeds, Sheffield to Doncaster, and Sheffield to Barnsley. So watch out for more news on that. You'll hear an update later on the new rolling stock. We are progressing through the stages to procure up to 450 new trains, and in terms of skills and modernisation, we are making really, really good progress with our driver training, and we are looking at how do we transform our training for the future, and we do have our first prototype training simulator in Leeds. Thanks to those who have visited from the committee. There's an offer open there for anybody else who wants to come and see that. So Performance improvement, though, remains our priority, and I will hand over now to Matt to give an update on that wider performance improvement plan.
Thank you, Tricia. Good afternoon, everyone. I think the privilege of having the core operation of Northern to run, so 2,650 trains, which makes all the other good stuff possible. And regretfully, over my tenure, hasn't all been as good as it needed to be, but we are stepping in the right direction. Before I go on, I'd like to thank the committee for the support in every which way they've done, particularly on Sundays, but then there's been lots of little bits and pieces around the country that every day we've had to pick up the phone to people and people are supported with. And then on a personal note on the accessibility, my son has a real basket of additional needs, can't use the trains, so the more money you can get for us, the better, and the better we can spend it, frankly. And whether I want to take him on the trains, well, it's a completely separate matter, but it's a very personal thing to me that we don't do enough with. There's sort of three call-out points. I think we are comfortable saying that we've stabilised the business. I make no bones about copying some of the good work and good narrative, again, that Chris led TPT with. Getting control and calm of these railway businesses is a key thing if you're going to improve. That was a key component of Sunday's tough decision this committee made at the back end of last year. And what we've been able to do off the back of that is see that calmness come into the way we've deployed our train crew and colleagues across the network throughout the week. There are some parts of the network that still aren't sustainably good enough. Interesting, the two examples that Mayor Braben and Mayor Burnham picked out in are some of our higher performing networks currently. So as they become part of local communities, hopefully that's going to be a good news story that can only grow. I think the other thing that's become really apparent once we've calmed the business down is to the point that, again, Mayor Burnham made. Northern is a business that for 20 years has been built on in different ways, and it's three regions, or it was three regions, and underneath that there were many different sort of local entities. So I said that when we got Sundays moving, which we had, we would then set about the work about restructuring, moving Northern to a different operating model, and we are now. We wrote to a number of colleagues a few weeks ago. We're now in the process of what I would call putting in place-based leadership, so that you've got people with smaller numbers of trains to worry about, more locally spread around the big cities, the big populations, so that where we've got some performance challenges, the relationships can be stronger, choices can be more well informed, and the leadership breadth and reach that my team can get around the colleagues who run the services for the places they live in can improve. That is just an opportunity presented to us. Tricia gave me the green light to do it, and we're pushing on with that. We're in the final throes of doing the people process, so once people start to be appointed to roles, etc., we'll come back out again in the next few weeks to give another update. And I do genuinely think it's a really great footprint in the GBR space to say, for our bit, we can go however far you want to go, but we're not waiting for GBR to come. We are making a difference so that local places have senior leaders in rail who live, work and lead teams in those localities. I think the other bit before I hand back to Tricia, that we don't really talk too much about, and we certainly haven't in the last 12 months, is the work we're going to need to continue to do before the new trains come. So new trains are for Northern, long overdue. Pace is going was a great step, but those of you, even in some of our high performing areas who travel on the network, will see a lot of our trains are brilliantly kept up to date and clean by our staff on board, but they're not that new. Some of our stuff is 40, 45 years old, and we are spending a huge amount of time and effort keeping them safe and at times reliable, but sometimes not reliable enough, and we know that. The message to the committee is that underneath this high-level brief, we have, in the last year, refreshed positively almost the entire leadership team of my engineering function. And we've got a real focus on creating high-paying, high-skilled jobs, again, in places like Newton Heath and Neville Hill and up in Heaton, etc. So we've got, for the next 5 years, really great people maintaining and looking after this asset, which is going to need a lot of love and attention just to keep it going until we get to the point of having the new trains. That work is ongoing. There's a really good level of detail in it. It's progressing well. Again, I know there are some areas where we're not as good as we need to be, and I'd invite all committee members either to come and see some of this stuff in real life in the depots. You don't often get there. We don't get there as much as we'd like, and to work together with us to build that narrative of well-paid, high-skilled jobs which are good for rail, but also good for the economy in which these people work and live. That's me at Cantor, and I'll hand back to Tricia.
Thanks, Matt. So we'll continue to stabilise. It is all about performance improvement. That will give customers certainty. That will bring people back to rail, enable customers to continue to use rail, and for us, the Sunday plan is supporting that. So huge thanks for helping us and supporting us with that. We will monitor demand really, really closely. We have some ability to flex to help with events. Summer's coming up, and we will endeavour to put specials on and help with the demand. But at the same time, we're continuing to deliver across a wide range of activities, including accessibility, just to build that confidence and enable further growth. Hand back, Chair.
Thank you, Tricia. Thank you, Matt. Should we just pause and obviously any questions to Northern I think would be useful at this point, and then Chris will take your update separately. Tracy, over to you.
Thank you. Firstly, I would recommend anybody having a go at the driver simulation. Unfortunately, that cow did nothing, and I ran the cow over. But it's an incredible bit of
Who you were
tech.
talking about?
It's an animal, not a person. It's a really great bit of kit, and it's great to see Northern investing in that driver training, because that was part of the issue, wasn't it, of the last couple of years, that you can't get drivers through training fast enough, and this does speed it up, so it's a good news story. My challenge to you, though, is that in the papers, there's no growth in capacity between December 25 and December 29. And with growth at TransPennine, how are you going to cope with crowding? And certainly when you're looking at the increase of 30 million, as you mentioned, and there is no extra places for these people to go, what are you going to do about crowding?
Thank you. I think it's a point well made. Capacity is something that we've now got digital capability on all of our trains, so we can really understand where our customers are moving to and from. Reliability is the key. If we've got to make sure that performance underpins everything we do. So the market headroom study that we've had demonstrate that if we get performance improving, then that will bring growth in its own right. We do need new trains. We haven't got an unlimited stock of rolling stock, and we do, as Matt mentioned, need to address some of the issues we've got with our very old trains. Some of them are 40 years old. So for us, we do have to make choices and prioritise, but our study shows that there is capacity at certain times of the day, certain times of the week. Obviously, if we enact our Sunday plans, that will give us headroom as well. So performance on Sundays is a key part of that challenge to increase revenue.
Would it be possible to give us a percentage figure, Tricia, as to how much, what percentage full are your services if you average it across the timetable? So, what's your growth headroom there? For?
At a headline, and mindful of the volume of services, we did some work and only went through it last week. Just shy of 500 of our trains today will be running around with about 90% capacity. But they're quite spread. So you'll go to Leeds North West, it's full most of the day. It's some of the trains in Council Hinchcliffe in geography have got real pinch points, peaks, where around schools and getting people to work, but then in the middle of the day, not much is happening. So what I think we will be able to work hopefully with this committee on is where can we use that asset where it's not being utilised, how can we be more agile to strengthen around peaks, to perhaps grow patronage where we're carrying around not enough capability at the moment. That then allows us to invest in future choices. So beyond that headline stat, I think the best thing we would do is offer that we've shared the work we went through last week, which has got real line by line detail about where the headroom is. Not many of our services are full. Certainly across the day, if not in the peaks, and I think we've got to do what we're seeing with the sustained performance improvement is what we've got currently is just picking up, and we've just got to do more of it. Definitely share that. Yeah.
So Murray?
It's just 10 o'clock on a Friday, heading south from Kirby Stephen. The world and his aunt are all getting on an aeroplane from Leeds, and there's only 2 cars. And you can't. The dear lady with the trolley can't get up and down the train because that one's full. Whenever there's 4 cars, there's hardly anybody on it.
Yes, I think so. I think, and these committees, we talked about the value and the power of this committee, and I'd very much see it in the next 5 years. to Mayor Braben's point, we've got a finite number of trains. We can probably get more people to work for us, but principally it's how we use them currently is how we've done it for a while. How we use them in the future, I think this is where this committee has real influence, accountability, authority to help us make some choices, and we should be part of informing that, certainly not deciding on our own.
Is it too difficult to put longer trains on during the peak and have shorter trains running in the off-peak? Is that just too complicated?
Sometimes it's the infrastructure that restricts us. So one of our busiest routes that is unfulfilled in terms of we can't meet the demand is Leeds, Sheffield, Nottingham, and the restriction there is the platform at Leeds. So if the platform at Leeds was longer, then we could get longer trains in. At the moment, we can't. So we're running a brand new train, one of our really lovely trains, and unfortunately can't be any longer. We can't couple it up with another of our new trains because of the infrastructure. So sometimes it's the restriction is the infrastructure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Just to jump in on that, if I may, that's part of the White Rose plan as well. Yeah. We see that is a real pinch point and a challenge going out of that side of the station, and that's why the T-shape was our preferred choice. So yeah, we're aware, but that's why the partnership's so important, isn't it?
David?
Yeah, if it helps, we have arranged for lead officers to get a detailed briefing from Northern on that interim rolling stock capacity issue next week, so we'll be able to report back to you after that and also provide those stats as well.
David, Katie?
Thank you. That's what it is. It can only do two at a time. I think that this just places some of the work that the committee can do about future proofing, actually, because as we'll come on to the investment plan, it's not just about what we invest in the infrastructure, it's then how we use the services on it. So this committee is really uniquely placed to almost do the kind of pre-GBR joining up of track and chain and having the chance to think where those cross-boundary services are happening, working with our colleagues in the TOCs, working with our colleagues in Network Rail to inform some of those choices. There are billions that have got to be spent and are already allocated up to 2035 for various pieces of critical infrastructure across the north. We're not going to get everything we want on them. It's quite simply because of the envelope. So actually the value this committee can have in helping inform some of those choices that are then made by the industry, I think is incredibly valuable. So yes, we've got the report and we can share that and make that available with officers. But I think this comes on to actually that wider reform and the role of this committee going forward, at least as we transition to GBR, to be able to have that oversight of the investment of track and train and actually what makes sense for the north, as well as and alongside what makes sense in our city regions, mayoral combined authorities and LTAs too. So I think it's just part of the bigger picture here, opportunity for the committee.
Makes sense. Katie, just to get clarity on Tracy's question, 30 million extra journeys can be accommodated by 2030 without any change in the rolling stock or any change in the current timetable.
Yeah.
So that could be done.
Utilise the capacity and improving performance.
Okay.
Right across the north.
Yeah.
That's part of it. That's part of the problem.
Thank you. Anyone else with anything for none? Sorry, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of future-proofing and succession planning, what are you doing to recruit apprentices? Do you have special... I mean, it's a wide area to cover. If somebody from St Helens wants to be a train driver, would they have to go to Crewe to train? Are there local skills centres? And are you actively recruiting in local colleges and schools for apprentices? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're one of the biggest recruiters of apprentices in the whole of the rail industry. So we've got a real healthy academy. We've had an Ofsted inspection and we got good with some areas outstanding. So we're really proud of the work that we do in our academies. Inevitably, you have to centralise some of the training. So we're centralising Leeds, we centralise in Manchester, and that's where our train simulators are going to be. We'll have 32 train simulators, but we'll have motion simulators as well. And this will be a first for UK Rail, where and that will attract talent into our industry. We don't struggle to recruit train drivers or conductors at all. We have got 20 train crew depots right across the north, so probably the closest would be Wigan, but we've also got Liverpool, Manchester Vic, Manchester Pick. So we can accommodate therefore very local talent. So no issues with training, recruitment, modernisation of training is the key for us.
Just on that important point, I think when we talk about integration of rail with other transport, I think Anne's point needs to be then considered in the broadest kind of sense as well, because we very much want there to be B-network career options for young people in a way that they've not had for many years, because in a very fragmented transport world, it's been difficult for progression within it. You become a bus driver, then you're a bus driver, and that's it. But we very much would encourage you to start to think about how do you create a bus driver, tram driver, train driver route, going, what's the core competency that you need as a grounding, so rather than rail just looking at only rail recruitment, it would be good if you could start to think through what a new approach to public transport careers looks like, because I think that might in the end bring more people to public transport. I think our workforce is probably at the older end, isn't it, really, and we're not necessarily bringing through young people. I don't think it's attractive enough as it should be. But when in a more integrated system, you can change the offer to young people. I think it's a really important thing that needs some further work as we take the integration journey forward. Thank you, Tricia. Thank you, Matt. It's been a good update, and clearly there's progress. Obviously, we want to see those Sundays back as quickly as possible. We know there's lots of work going on there, but I know we obviously had to be realistic in when the time frame. But the Christmas period is always very busy, and if it were possible this year, that would be something that we would very much want to see. But turning to your direction now, Chris, I think the figures speak for themselves. I think we all experience a very different TransPennine offer. No problem, Jean. Yeah, hopefully it's on time. Yeah, we want a text from the platform in case it's not. We'll relay it straight to Northern. I think we can see the change, Chris, and I think the committee should be proud of the role we played in backing the difficult things that needed to be done to bring about that change. But you said you would do it. You have done. Over to you.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Chair. So for those of you who don't know me, Chris Jackson, Managing Director at TransPennine Express. Firstly, big thank you to the committee for inviting me back. Pretty much the 2-year anniversary, actually, of TPE being brought into public ownership. And of course, I should use this opportunity that as it's the first in-person RNC since the election, congratulations on the new members. Myself and the team really look forward to working with you to improve railways in your part of the world. So I'm pleased to say that I'm here to give a largely positive update about the progress that we've made in that time, thanks to the support of elected members, thanks to the support of Gary's team in RMP, TFN, and of course the brilliant colleagues and partners that we've got at TPE and Northern supported as well, and Network Rail, who help keep our trains running 24 hours a day. I would describe the task, though, of transforming TPE as only about half done. We've still got a number of legacy issues to deal with, and of course the complexity of delivering many billions of pounds worth of investment on our doorstep. Chair, I propose to speak for around about 7 to 8 minutes. If that is beyond the time, just give me a nod and I'll speed up. I propose that we go through the slides, which I'm starting with a pretty picture of the train with my name on, and I'll give you the nod when we go through for the benefit of those online as well. So we have got a plan to fix this business fully. No, they're within the pack.
They're in the meeting pack.
Yeah.
So under, if you're on the item additional,
No
great.
worries. And starting with that picture of, yeah, there we go. So we have got a plan to fix the business fully, and in the short time I've got with you today, I thought it'd be helpful to talk through the journey today and also share some data, which I think will act as good proof points to show the turnaround and crucially what we're planning to do between now and the 2030s, which of course includes how we intend to realise the massive opportunities that are going to come with the TransPennine route upgrade, the multi-billion-pound programme that's right on our doorstep. So moving on to the next slide. Committee will remember that back in 2023 we spoke on quite a regular basis about some of the challenges that the business faced and what we needed of course to do to fix those challenges. Cast your mind back to some of those early meetings. You know, we were cancelling around 20% of trains on a daily basis. Relationships were really fraught with colleagues, they were fraught with trade unions. Customer and stakeholder trust were at an all-time low. We were impacting economic growth and customers were actively seeking alternatives to using the train. Dial forwards, and thanks to your support, and you've referenced it earlier, you know, we presented a plan in September 2023. We delivered, I think, on our promises in that plan. We completed the stabilisation phase of our plan following the reinstatement of our services, which we did in December 2024, and we're now firmly in phases 2 and 3 of our comprehensive to-do list, which I think will turn this business from strength to strength. My personal reflections, and I often reflect on how things have gone, that it was rightly challenging, I think, for this committee to accept the plan that we tabled, and quite rightly you asked lots of challenging questions, and it also, for my team, it was a gigantic task to develop a workable solution to get us out of the hole that we were in. But I must give credit to the whole team at TPE and also Gary's team at R&P. We did that work together really, really quickly. And remember as well, my team were largely the same people that worked for the old TPE. They transferred across under TUPE. So they knew what needed to be done. They knew the issues. All I was there to do really was just to give them the headspace to do what they needed to do, introduce constructive challenge where I needed to, and also galvanise support for a clear direction without ultimate short-term commercial pressures. So I like to think that through the process, we've demonstrated that we're a trusted and credible partner that you can do business with. That's what I like to think, but of course you'll be the judges of that. But either way, what we've achieved, I think, is a good framework for the future about how we can work together, close working between the industry and TFM members as we face into those challenges and opportunities. So on to the next slide. That is the proof point one. So perhaps the biggest standout for me is just what a stable and reliable service can do for customer trust and confidence. So for the last 2 quarters, and I think the next results are due out next week, I expect us to be right at the top again. We have been the fastest growing operator nationally, with a 42% increase in customer numbers since May 2023. That is most definitely on the back of the 75% reduction in cancellations, which in turn has helped customer advocacy to get to record levels now at +20. Stakeholder satisfaction with performance has gone up by 89%, and colleague engagement is also at new peaks of 77%, which translates into some of the best absence figures in UK rail. So I've always said that if you do right by your people, they in turn will do right by our customers, and I think we're demonstrating that in abundance. So on to the next slide. That shows the percentage of trains that are cancelled over time with various milestones, of course, that you can see vertically. It shows that we got better, but it shows that we've still got a lot more that we need to do, particularly as an industry, to tackle some of the big hitting incidents like trespass incidents, but also ageing infrastructure, in particular between Preston and Scotland, which has been really impactful for us. When you look at TPE ourselves, we know that we are still excessively dependent on driver rest day working. Should driver rest day working, for example, be withdrawn tomorrow, don't worry, it won't be, because we've got much stronger relationships with ASLEF. But if it was, you know, that would be impactful. We're still vulnerable because of our extremely inflexible terms and conditions. So addressing those terms and conditions is the last piece of the jigsaw that will fix TPE for good, which is why we're retabling a proposal very shortly with Gary's team at Rail North Partnership and also the DFT, which I think makes a really compelling case for change. And my ask would be that, if needed, you know, I'll share that with committee, and hopefully you can get behind us and support us to fix this business once and for all. Next slide. So we do have a plan to address other constraints that we've got in our operation, notably new investments in train stabling, new investments in train maintenance, along with a reliability focus, particularly on our Class 185s, the diesel trains, and our Class 397s that operate on the West Coast Main Line. And of course, we need to do that on top of the massive investment that I've mentioned on the doorstep, which is the TransPennine route upgrade. That will mean that for at least 160 days per year between now and the end of the decade, customers will be diverted away from the core route in some places between Manchester and Leeds. That's the scale of the investment. My job is to make sure that we keep passengers' bottoms on train seats rather than rail replacement bus seats as much as possible. And we're doing that, and I'm delighted to say that from July we'll be operating 3 trains an hour between West Yorkshire and Manchester on diversionary routes as well, which will only help to improve capacity. And I also think that reflects the progress that we've made at closing out some of the driver training backlog, which of course was at the root of some of the issues facing TPE in the early days. And I think the TIU programme, I'm sure you're going to hear about that at the TFM board. I think that's an excellent example of cross-industry working. The programme's on time, it's on budget, we're an integral part of it, myself and Tricia. And our modelling shows on that slide that you can see in front of you that, you know, the supply of seats will be sufficient to match the demand that we project up until the end of the decade, at which point our 29 brand new trains will be rolling out on the network. So the last slide, I think these are really exciting times to be part of Rail in the North, and this slide's purely just there to demonstrate that we've got a plan to fix the vulnerabilities of the business and of course realise the benefits of the TIU programme up to 2034 and beyond. And of course with the spending review that you touched on earlier, Chair, that's coming tomorrow, and the announcements of last week, you know, we at TPE, industry colleagues at Network Rail at Northern, we're really ready to work with you to build on the benefits of TIU and of course the additional opportunities that devolution will bring as well. So in conclusion, thanks very much for your support over the last 2 years. We simply wouldn't have been here if you hadn't have bought into our 3-stage plan to stabilise, prepare and transform the business. I hope that we've also played our part to restore the trust of your constituents in travelling with TPE and also gone some way in restoring committee members' trust in the rail industry, actually, that when we say we'll deliver something, we actually will for the benefit of the North and Scotland. So thank you.
Excellent, Chris. That's the best presentation I think we've ever had at this committee. And I do go back, actually, it was the committee's decision, a difficult one at the time, to call for operator of last resort. Clearly was the right decision when you look at the cancellations graph that you just you showed us before. So well done. It's a credit to you and your team, and you know, grateful if you could relay our thanks to them as well. One question from me, I'm sure other colleagues might wish to come in. I'm a regular user of your services during the football season in particular, and consequence of your success, I think, is they are quite crowded at weekends, similar to the point John was making before. Are you aware of that? Is there anything you can do to mitigate that? It can be very difficult. And I'm going to make this point again, and I don't know what maybe I'm speaking for myself here rather than the committee. Is there really a case going forward for the class distinction on trains? When trains are full, can we justify first-class carriages on these trains, given the points we made before, that there's limited capacity on trains going across the north? I can just say to you, on match days at Newtonley Willows, people struggle not to go in, almost end up in the doorway of the first-class carriage because the train is so full, and it just feels time to maybe review that.
And fair challenge, Chair, if I can come back on that point. So linked to the question you asked about capacity, our data for last week, for example, shows that 4% of our trains were over 110% of seated capacity. That's how we measure it. So 100% of the seats occupied and people standing in corridors, not uncomfortably standing, but standing. That's a good measure. So 4% of our trains. So we recognise that at points in certain journeys and certain times of day, trains will be busy. The example that you give there, Andy, about Newtonley Willows into Liverpool, normally Monday to Saturday we operate on a normal timetable 2 trains an hour between Manchester, Victoria and Liverpool Lime Street. one of them calling it Nutley Willows, the other one calling it at Lee Green. Sometimes during engineering work, we need to pinch those trains because they're going on longer diversionary routes that take longer. We need to allocate some of that capacity elsewhere across the network. But we are acutely aware, because we have all the data to show where our train services are busy. And as you'll see that, we have in the past, when there's been particular major events on, deployed very special additional trains for Edinburgh Fringe, for the Liverpool FC parade, and also other examples for Co-op Live events between Manchester and Liverpool. So we're acutely aware of it, recognise there are a problem on certain services, but the team are focused, and when we can allocate capacity, we will do.
First class.
Well, what I would say is, we're having that discussion now about within our new trains specification. But what I would say is, we empower our colleagues on board. It's their discretion as to whether they want to declassify first class for certain portions of the journey. I trust my conductors to be able to make that decision if they so think it's necessary.
I think one thing we should do, and it's, obviously I've raised the question, and it's not for a decision anytime soon, but I do think at this committee, as we go forward, there needs to be a discussion about the timetable, number one, about is it too complex and could it be simplified? Because I think Northern, again, things you've inherited, but you've got quite unwieldy services, haven't you, across the north, and simplifying the timetable I think might help. But can we think about simplifying the fare structure as well? And the first class question arises as part of that. I do think we should not kind of hold back from those issues, because I personally think there isn't on Northern commuter services. I don't think there is necessarily a case for first class. It's very often empty completely. And even if it's not overcrowded with people standing up, it can be still pretty challenging with the numbers of people. So to come back to those issues perhaps for another day. Tracy? Thanks, Peter.
Thanks so much. And again, just to amplify what Andy's been saying, having lived on that route and having PTSD from P-coding, not being able to get to work and hearing really tragic stories of people whose lives have been upended because of TPE, and the fact that it was a failing company, I do think it was the right decision for this board. But also congratulations to you and the team, because it is now a service that we're proud of. My challenge to you, however, is in this the blockades, particularly because the buses that are replacing the services sit outside my office. I can see it's like being in a museum. Some of these buses have been dusted off from York Rail Museum, and they've been shunted out onto the streets of Leeds, and they're empty because nobody wants to use them because they're not comfortable. You can't charge your phone. They just wouldn't choose it. So it's the consistency and the quality of the bus replacement, because people are prepared to live with it, because they know they're going to get a better service, but they're going to be in their car if they know that it's some old charabang from back in the West Riding days. I know I've raised it with you before, but I think the committee should be aware that is, I think, part of the problem of the blockades, that people are now going on the M62, and we've just got a different type of problem.
Thank you both. Just to come back to the first class point, I take on board. I think one of the things we just need to be cognisant of is, of course, since we put an improved first class offer on board our service between Liverpool and Newcastle via Leeds, and also on the West Coast Main Line, we are getting a lot of people wanting to upgrade and pay for tickets that are more expensive and therefore have a higher yield, that therefore have a net positive effect on the amount of subsidy that we take for the government to operate. And we're projecting to take around £160 million of government subsidy to operate our services this year. So we'll just need to be careful when we make decisions on wider first class. And on the point, I'm more than happy, Mayor Brabin, to get you some stats on the age of vehicles, which we can share with the wider committee. Because I recognise, yes, there are certain old vehicles that are used. That's purely a supply and demand thing. But we're trying to keep those older vehicles to an absolute minimum. And I can get you some solid stats on that from the latest blockade.
Chris, I'm going to start sending you pictures of these old museum pieces outside my office.
Thanks, Tracy. Can't see anyone else? No. Well, I'm sure I do speak for everyone, Chris, in saying again, fantastic presentation. And actually, it's obviously a very different story from Northern as well, and it's really important to acknowledge that. You know, it has been tough 12, 18 months for you both, and we know that, but we can also see the progress as well, and the stability that's coming back, although I think you have both acknowledged there's further, well, you did acknowledge there's further to go. So thank you both. Colleagues, should we move on? The time is slightly against us now. So the rolling stock strategy, we've touched on this a couple of times today. Katie, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce this. This involves both TPE and Northern, although a much larger order of trains for Northern. Tracy just articulated what our ambitions would be in terms of a modern travelling environment. Step-free access. I don't know if that, you know, if we've developed the criteria yet fully for the new stock, but it would be good if this committee could have a role in agreeing the criteria for the new stock before those decisions are made. But Katie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the paper as read, given where we are, and we have touched on this already. The purpose of the paper was really to start the conversation with the committee, and I think it's great that we've got our Northern and TPE colleagues here, so I think I will probably turn to them to deal with committee questions. But I think there is just one point I did want to bring out in the paper, is that we're talking about procurement of new trains somewhere in the future. We have issues now around rolling stock now, and your officers, we are getting together next week to talk more with Gary and his team about the current issues and what some of the options are. There may be some trade-offs and choices in there, but I think, and I know everyone will experience it probably in this room, but the quality, the consistency point, and the reliability is we recognise an issue, and I think it's about how we can support in the short term as well. So I just wanted to draw committee's attention to that, because that is advice that will follow separately. The purpose of the paper today was very much to cite you on the plans as the procurements are getting underway with both our train operating companies. So I won't say any more, Chair, and
Who will set the criteria, Katie? Would it be the Department for Transport?
I'm going to come to Gary on that one, because this is very much Rail North partnership.
It's kind of a coalition between the operators telling us what exists at its most basic, because you can only really buy, you're always at risk if you set out to buy something that doesn't already exist, and then an interface with ourselves through the partnership and TFN and the department, but in large part we rely on the operators to give us their professional opinions on what will work. There's also, when it comes to going out to procurement, you have to be careful, as you'll know from procurements that you have operated yourselves, that what you buy on is a balance of quality elements and a price element. So in that sense, the procurement also has to put a limit round about what it is that what you would look to purchase and at what price. So, but it's very much the case, I think, that in the case of the material that's been bought, the trains that have been bought for TRU, they need to meet the bigger TRU objectives of end-to-end journey times and so forth, which then does give some tension between what type of train that will be, how accessible it will be if it has a diesel engine underneath, and so there are lots of elements of I think back and forward with the market, really, Chair, in order to understand what it is that one is going to be able to purchase. For Northern, it's very much more being driven by the need to replace the 1.5X fleets, the older flat-fronted diesel fleets, with something just better, full stop. And I think it's fair to say that the specification that we're looking at for the Northern trains is probably better than anything that runs in Northern at the moment, including the trains that we have just got through buying. So in that respect, it's a modernity issue, I think.
I mean, it's worth just acknowledging that at this point, to go back to our earlier discussion today, some of these trains will spend a lot of their operational life within integrated systems across the north, and certainly from our point of view, you know, we always said at the start of the B network that we wanted Metrolink standards to apply across all modes in terms of levels of accessibility, customer experience. So, I know that might bring some complexity to it, but I think we do need to be involved in the setting of the criteria here for the rolling stock.
Just to come in, Chair. So we're in the process of setting that specification. Just to give Chair and committee comfort, we spoke about this, I recall, several committees ago. We've actively engaged with stakeholders, with disability groups, to make sure that we're specifying the right sort of things that the North needs. If I cast my mind back to, when I was at Northern and the 195 and the 331 fleet, if we had the ability to specify those trains ourselves, we would have specified them in a very different way. That was done, as I describe it, far removed in a big team somewhere down in London. This is different this time. We're actually buying 29 new trains, I can speak for TPE, and we're specifying a standard that fits the North and will fit the stakeholder aspirations. And also to give you comfort around accessibility, just quickly, my team have given me an update. They're quick on quickfire response. Recently, in the last month, a new national technical standard was issued on accessibility. That is a standard that every railway operator is expected to comply with, and we've built that into our mandatory requirements for the bidders, and we also require improvement and innovation above and beyond said standard. So I can't probably say any more about that, but rest assured that the accessibility elements are being fully considered as part of our bidding process.
Is that level access, Chris?
Probably wouldn't like to say specifically at the moment, but what I would say is we are asking for accessibility, improvement and innovation beyond what's in the current, what we call national technical standard that was issued 2 weeks ago.
Katie?
I think, Chair, this is actually really helpful because this is what we wanted to draw out of the conversation, what's on members' minds. And clearly we've got the work that we've done around what we think the accessibility needs are across our stations. We've shared that with colleagues. If, Chair, you're content, I think there's an action on us here to go away and do a little bit of a comparison between what's in the spec, what the committee's ambitions have been around accessibility, and to give you some further advice on this, because I think your point about these trains ultimately, if we're thinking about those timescales, integrating with your plans within city regions is not lost on us at all. Chris is right, the new technical standards there, we have referenced it, but there's a bit of detail probably to just get underneath what that means in practice. So we'll take that away and work with our colleagues at Northern and TP to get a little bit more detail.
Just to ask, and apologies if this was discussed because I was just answering a message, but just about the cascading of units, just to make sure that we understand that there's an expectation that you're going to be doing that. So who is making that decision?
It's a bit anti-climate. Can you just clarify, when you say cascading, so in terms of, we'll get rid of the 15X, the flat-fronted diesel, that's a good description of what they are.
When things come off lease?
Yeah, so the plan would be we are working to keep what we've got working, probably to around the cusp of the 2030s. So when the new stuff arrives, the older stuff will go, and it will be in an age condition related, and we'll bring them in the way that the newer stuff you've seen on the Northern network is.
Sorry, I wasn't clear, my mistake. That cascading from other operators into our region, who is making that decision to support your expansion of the fleet?
Okay.
Is that a correct assumption that that's
there
what
are
you're also going to be doing?
there's probably two things there, Mayor Braben. So the new trains, we'll see what we've got currently replaced with new trains. Yeah. There are some conversations going on with rolling stock companies about trains that are currently sat in the market now. That is a decision that we would heavily inform and would eventually roll through Gary's team because it's a cost thing. The things we will look at is, what does a customer get? Frankly, does it improve what we've got currently got? And we'd just offset that when you, again, as Chris knows only too well as well, when you bring in new trains, there's a whole lot more training and development again. So that would be absolutely something we would surface in detail, put some choices in front of the committee and work with Gary and the team to make any choice in the interim. But it's a heavy choice, what I would describe it. There is some good stuff in the market potentially, but bringing that in would not be a decision we would want to race to. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Do we end up with a fully new fleet though by the end of this, or are you saying that some are going to be recycled? Some will be. Trains from London, South East, and.
No, sorry, Contricia.
we will have a mixed fleet. So we've got our new fleet, which is 4 years old. So that's our 195s, our 331s. We will replace our 15X fleet and our 769s, which is a hybrid fleet that runs on the Southport line. And then we've still got some other fleet within there, so things like 331s. So it will take us some time to fully have a new fleet. I think there's some numbers in one of the papers that shows the different tranches.
Okay, thanks, Tricia. Yeah, Stephen?
I'm not sure it says in the paper, but do you understand yet what the timelines are for those replacements stock?
So for the 15X fleet, and I'm bringing in the first tranche of new trains, as Matt mentioned, you're looking at 2030, and then that fits in line with the TRU timescales as well. Because the other thing to think about when we're looking at specification is electronic signalling. So we do need to then link in with the TransPennine route upgrade and the West Coast Main Line ambitions for electronic signalling.
Thank you, everyone. I think on this, we're going to have to go into bat for you as well, aren't we, in terms of the Treasury sign-off for all of this. So the more we could have a really compelling sort of proposition, if you like, because presumably this will help you increase revenue, seat numbers across the northern system, both TP and northern, and so it'd be good to sort of because if this is also a plan. The upfront investment gets us to a more sustainable railway, just really getting the argument ready and having a bit of a plan to make the case for that investment as and when it is ready to go. So keen to come back to this issue. It's quite an important one for us, isn't it?
We'll take that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. Infrastructure, we've touched on this quite a bit today. Hopefully should not take us too long. So I'm sorry, I'm just checking who was. Charlie was going to introduce this one for us. Charlie, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the paper provides you with an update on the development and delivery of rail infrastructure across the north, how these programmes are facilitating change, and a lot around how the governance of these is being updated and steps we're taking with partners to shape outcomes. A bit closer. So previously this committee asked us for the plan. So you wanted to understand what was happening when to help inform some of the decisions you were taking around services and rolling stock. And last September we provided you with the state of play, which was the first step on that road, and that provided for the first time that single overview of all of the rail programmes in development and delivery. I'm pleased to say that we've since updated that, so you've got a new version which was appended to the document, and a summary of the changes are provided within the report. But in that time we've also been working with Network Rail. I've got John Joe with us today who's been instrumental in this work, and you'll see as an additional appendix the investment overview. Now, what that does is give you more specific detail of the interventions of each programme and the service outcomes that they each facilitate. And that document is here today. It's provided as a draft, though, because we recognise that it's an evolving picture. Things could change possibly as soon as tomorrow with the comprehensive spending review. But we wanted to bring it today because we need this to work for you. We want it to be a document that you can trust and that you can use to make decisions with. And I want you to view it, as you would, as an up-to-date and northern-focused version of RNEP, so that rail network enhancement programme that government's previously put out. We want it to be live, we want it to be agile. We've been working with your officers, with partners, with the industry to shape this. And what we need to do is maintain that so that we have that shared understanding of what's happening when and what any changes mean at local, regional and whole network level to inform some of that decision making. And it's going to underpin a lot of future work for us this. So you'll see in section 4 of the paper we talk about some of the long-term strategic planning work that has been commenced. That's being informed for the first time by our strategic transport plan. the aspirations of our partners, and also recent work on freight demand is feeding that. And that work is essentially asking what next. So we've got a pretty comprehensive view of what happens over the next decade, but beyond that is yet to be shaped, and we want to do that using the data and insights that we've collated through that strategic transport plan. And that's a really exciting piece of work because it's taking quite a novel approach, and when it's complete, it will tell us where some additional investment could be required, or where compromises might be needed. And again, the role of this committee in decision making. And what I want you to take away is that if you put together the state of play and that investment overview that we've provided you with today, with some of that long-term planning work, we can get towards that one single plan for the North Railways, which we can shape, we can evolve and make sure that it works for you. Section 6 through 8 then give you some of the updates on the governance structures, which we can take questions on, but ultimately it's about setting out ways and means through which we can create a smooth glide path for implementation of these programmes. There is an awful lot of investment happening. It is a substantial amount of change across this network in terms of the infrastructure, the services, how things run, and we are supporting the industry and the partners to make the most of that and where possible avoid some of the areas that we've seen in the past. You'll see in section 9 we're setting out some next steps that we're proposing of, again, how we continue to support and drive the industry forward in some of these places. That includes the previously endorsed task force boards and place-based groups that you supported in September. And it also includes advice and recommendation pieces which we'd like to continue to work with partners on, and there's some suggested topics in there for consideration. So I hope that's a helpful overview, and happy to take any questions.
It's extremely helpful, Charlie. Thank you very much. I do like that sort of colour-coded map you've developed now. That gives us much clearer visibility of what's in the offing. Susan?
Yeah, it may be a basic question really, but how does this relate to sort of Northern Arc and White Rose Agreement?
So we've been really mindful to make sure that any of the ambitions and programmes that are in those are fully aligned with what we're putting forward. So we've started with the major programmes. You've got TransPennine Route Upgrade and some of the Manchester programme, but we've layered in the points at which some of those other programmes are set out in White Rose and Northern Arc would land. But I know, John, you've been working closely with partners across those regions as well to make sure that we've got full alignment of those points of information.
Absolutely. So from the various project programmes that contribute towards that White Rose Agreement kind of vision and the aspirations within, they're all captured within this investment overview document and the outcomes each look to achieve. It's from that baseline that we would then look to work with yourselves and industry partners on that next step of identifying the consolidated viewpoint of outcomes that we want to realise through the various investments and how that all comes together and how we could potentially tailor that towards a strategy for realising it. So yeah, worked closely with the White Rose Agreement previously in that production, and it is captured within the investment overview currently within the pack.
So this would be a document that keeps coming back and back to this committee and gets updated as and when commitments are firmed up, and yeah, great.
I think it also, Chair, bearing in mind the work of the North of England Integration Steering Group, which is kind of the sort of pre-GBR going to transition to make sure all of these things fit together, because you have interdependencies. You can build TRU, but how do you plug it into the West Coast? How do you plug it into the East Coast? I think this document gives us a baseline for you as a committee to inform some of those choices and how they formulate and take place through that integration steering group in the interim while we're transitioning to GBR as well.
John?
Thanks very much. Lots of very, very good things, and appreciate, for example, increased capacity in terms of infrastructure around Manchester actually really helps places like Barrow and Windermere, however far away they may be, because more of those trains can get through, so it improves everything. Having said that, just echoing what Councillor Kilben was saying earlier about the whole of the North, well aware that things which are really important to us, like what has now become ECRU, which was the posh word for beige, wasn't it? The Energy Coast Rail Upgrade, that line that connects Barrow through Sellafield to Carlisle is really vulnerable because lengths of it are single track. And if there's a problem down at Grange, then the only railway out of Barrow is all that way round on a single track, which is a bit hopeless. Equally, we talked about in the previous item, there was growth. Tourism didn't get a mention. The Lake District can take more tourists, just can't take any more cars. So the passing loop on the Lakes line would make a huge difference in capacity. And just to remind, the whole of the north does include the far north.
I think it's very important that all constituent parts of the north, as it moves towards the Midlands, there's a visibility, even if there's nothing on the. I think it's very clear. I think it needs to give everyone on this committee visibility of what's in the planning in relation to their areas, which I think this is what you're trying to do. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So the state of play, so the Gantt chart, as it were, is trying to demonstrate what is pretty much committed. So it's showing there's a level of maturity to a scheme. But in the background behind that, we have much longer lists of what is sort of the art of the possible, what are the schemes that we're trying to explore. And as they mature, I would expect to see them slot into place as part of this plan.
It feels like it might be a good idea to have aspirations of the areas as well, even if they're not in any time frame. So that if this document should be really shared by all industry partners, shouldn't it? So everyone's clear about what is, even if it's not committed and there's no plan for it, at least it's known, what those the passing line or whatever, it's understood where combined authorities and other regions are prioritising infrastructure. Because I think part of the logic of this committee, I think as Katie was saying before, is that we do and will prioritise in a constrained environment, and that's what we're here to do, isn't it? Or one of our roles. So I think if we could build that into this as well, even if they're unallocated and they're just, if you like, more ambitions as opposed to schemes, I think it's quite important for this document to sort of find some way of expressing those ambitions.
Also, I'd just say as well, for developers and for wider investment, it's really powerful. Because certainly at UK Reef, people talking about the corridors of opportunity linked to transport, where the housing's going to go, where the cultural anchor and all of that. But this is clear evidence of our desire for progression, and also the areas that are going to get that investment and that focus. So it's a really strong piece of work. So yeah, thank you for being so clever.
I think that's the general view. Okay. Thank you. We expect to see more of this then at future committees. So thank you both. We've kind of been through RMP partnership operational update. Gary, is there anything else that you wanted to draw our attention to?
I don't think so, Chair, unless anyone has any comments. I'll save you from trying to find whatever word I am if Charlie's clever, so I'll leave it at that.
We do have obviously still some issues with Avanti services. We also have other operators, East Midlands Rail and others covered by this under this item, don't we? So I don't know if there were any questions in respect of any of those.
May I just request that cross country come? We don't see them enough, and the challenges that we see, east to west, north to south, they really are part of the solution, whilst also at times really struggling, and it'd be great to have them in the conversation.
I met with their managing director recently. She's very keen to join us, so we will work on a slot either for September or December, and similarly conversation with Avanti as well about joining us again. So we will get them both along.
Okay, thank you everybody. I don't think there's anything further on that, so that, I believe, concludes our agenda for today. Thank you very much, everyone. A very practical, focused meeting of the committee. The next meeting is scheduled for the 1st of September as a virtual meeting, I think. Everybody happy with that? There's nothing that is coming that means that that's going to be after the amendment.
I think we'll go with that date as the next committee meeting, Chair, but we will brief and call together anything we need to do in the in between. We've always got the ability to call an emergency meeting if we need to. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much for your attendance, everybody. And that's it. Meeting closed.